Dear ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I'm Dominik Bladner, the ITTF High Performance Manager, and I'm very delighted to warmly welcome all of you to our 39 ITTF High Performance and Development webinar with the topic, The World of Table Tennis Rubbers. We are very much interested in what our great guest will show us today regarding this topic. But before going over to the introduction of our guest, I want to talk shortly about our webinar code of the Q&A. To all the attendees, please leave your questions in the Q&A section. Our guest will try to answer as many as possible in the question and answer part of the webinar. Thank you very much for taking care of this. And now over to the introduction of our guest for today. It's a great pleasure and honor for us to warmly welcome a great expert and our dear colleague, Claudia Herwig, the ITTF Head of Equipment, and something related to her professional experience. She was a former table tennis player in the second Women's Bundesliga in Germany. From February 90 till December 91, she worked for Donik Sportartikel. From 1st January 92 till December 92, she worked for 1001 Holz Table Tennis Shop in Grenzau. And from the January 93 till April 11, 2011, she was the managing director of the ISN Deutsche Tischtennis Technologie GmbH. From September 2012 till August 18, she had a consulting company in Cologne. And from September 18 till today, she is the ITTF Head of Equipment. Thank you very much, Claudia, for taking the time. It's nice to meet you.
Thanks, Dominik. Same to you. So it's my pleasure to be here for the first equipment webinar. So thank you very much. Also for the very nice introduction. After 27 years in the industry, now it's time for the federation since 2.5 years. Yeah, we have a huge topic today, I think, the world of table tennis rubbers. I think you can speak about this years. I tried to prepare a first introduction into how the rubber industry developed in the last decades. And of course, the implementation of the new colors is a very nice chance to explain a bit and also to give some response to critique, to statements on the web. So this is our presentation, which I prepared for today.
Thank you very much, Claudia, and we are very much looking forward. And also a warm welcome to our ITTF High Performance Elite Coach, Massimo Costantini. So pass over to you, my dear colleague.
Thank you so much, Dominik, and of course, Claudia, for being with us today. We are going to talk, actually, Claudia is going to present very interesting facts about the rubbers, the equipment that we have to deal every day, every single moment when we are at the table, and is a matter where all the forums anywhere in the world discuss a lot. So we are very pleased to have Claudia here with us. And without further ado, I will pass the screen to Claudia for the presentation. Have a good one, Claudia.
Thank you, Massimo, for the nice words. So let's start. I will share my screen. Okay, I hope everybody can see my screen. Yeah, the world of rubbers, as mentioned before, it's a really huge area. And spend a lot of time in discussing different details and areas. In this meeting today, I thought it would be good to have an introduction a bit into the development of the rubber industry, of course, from my point of view. From my experience in close to 20 years in a rubber factory or company. And we will use the chance to speak a bit about the 4 new colors, which will be implemented in the 3rd quarter of this year. Okay, So our agenda for today is some information about the procedural steps inside a rubber production. Second part will be a development of table tennis rubber industry. Third one, influence of color in a rubber. And the fourth part is new colors, open questions and comments. And after I finish the presentation, some questions and answers from different sides. Okay, the procedural steps in a rubber production. I thought it's good to start here to give a general overview how a rubber is produced. It always starts with a recipe. This is the beginning of everything. After a chemist defined and wrote down the recipe, you need to organize the raw materials for both parts, for the rubber sheet and for the sponge. Of course, also for gluing later on. And the first quality control is the raw material when it's inside the company. For example, in the rubber part, you check the viscosity and things like this, so that every raw material is like it is expected and ordered. The next step in the rubber sheet production is mixing the material. And after the mixing, there's a shaping of the material so that it is prepared for the vulcanization part. Also here is a chemist quality control to check whether all chemicals are inside the recipe and everything is okay. The very important part is the vulcanization of the rubber sheet. From this part on, you can talk about rubber. Before it's elastic material, but not rubber. And the vulcanization is a process step which is pressure and heat. And this creates the final rubber, which is then has very special properties. Also here, there's a quality control after this step, so that also here the vulcanization runs as expected. Then the sponge part starts on the same level. It's the raw materials, also here a quality check. Then it's a mixing process and shaping the material. Also here quality control from the chemist side. Then the next part is to produce a sponge block. In the rubber sheet, you are producing the final rubber sheet, but in the sponge, you don't produce pieces, you produce a block. In this step, also here quality control, also the hardness on the block is measured. And then there's an additional step in the sponge production where the block, after some time in storage, will be sliced on the final thickness which the company or the product order was describing. Also here a quality check. Then both parts will go into the gluing. Gluing is very demanding in a rubber factory. It's not easy, very difficult process step. And the final one is the assembling, so punching in the final size and checking the rubber. There's one after the gluing, one quality control, and a final one. And also some samples will be kept in the factory always to be able to control whether there's something problematic when the rubber is in the market. So these are the procedural steps inside each rubber factory. Of course, how it's done, it's different. Yeah, you can see here it's a lot of process steps. Each one is critical for the final quality. That's because there are so many quality controls, because if you have a problem somewhere, then it's better to throw the product away in the early stage, not when it's a final rubber, because then it's of course more expensive. The character of rubber, of the natural material rubber, is when you turn one screw, others will turn with it, but you don't know which one. And this makes it very demanding for each producer. If you see the development of the industry, Until 1995, you needed 4 factories to produce 1 rubber. The system was in this time that factory A ordered the raw materials, were responsible for the mixing process, the shaping, and the vulcanization. Factory 2 was doing the same, but for sponge. Factory 3, so the sponge blocks were transported to a company where there's only slicing machines. This process step is also sensitive. You need good experience here to get the tolerances in a very low level. And then finally, the parts were delivered to a factory D, which were responsible for gluing and final assembling. In this system, the consequences is that each company has a deep knowledge in its own product field. If you imagine that you are producing rubber sheets only over decades, then of course your understanding and your knowledge is getting quite well. Problematic here is that a transfer of knowledge between the different parts is very difficult. And one company cannot influence the quality of the other company, or they can, but it's really not easy to have this transfer of communication. And of course, as we all know, table tennis rubber functions in the sum of its parts, and with the above system, to influence the single parts is impossible, or at least very difficult. Then from 1995 on, some companies started to change this system, so that 1 rubber was produced from this age on in 1 factory, which means that it's a very high vertical range of manufacture. The picture looks like this. So all process steps from the raw material on until the final assembling and delivery, dispatching to the brands is done in 1 company. The consequences here are the investment you need and the time needed to create the know-how in each single process step, of course, are huge. You will need years and decades to be an expert in each single step. But the positive parts are transfer of knowledge is guaranteed, because every day you speak between the different departments. You're analyzing, you're controlling everything. The company, of course, can influence every part of the product, which is a huge advantage. And regarding the sum of its parts, now the innovation strength is lying inside 1 company, and it was very clear that this was needed to make further innovations in rubber business. Yeah, the innovations which from this age on, from 1995, were coming into the markets. Of course, in the beginning, you start with 1 recipe in pimple in rubber, then you start with pimple out rubbers. Also in sponge, in my former company, we started with one sponge recipe and a few rubber sheet recipes. And then, of course, step by step, from research and development, the department will create additional recipes with different playing properties, some of them with different kinds of rubbers, natural rubber or synthetic rubber, with the different vulcanization systems, with the different chemicals. So there are a lot of options. And this was the first step. The companies worked and invested time. The second one was, if you have the sponge vulcanization inside your company, you invest a lot of time to understand how the different hardnesses can be produced. At the moment, I'm 10 years out, so but in my past, we had a range from 30 degrees up to 55, with 2.5 degrees steps in between. So you can imagine there are a lot of options. And of course, the sponge hardness influences the performance of the rubber quite heavily. The second part was the innovation tension in both parts, in rubber sheet and sponge. And this was a huge innovation in rubber business, and I think a very positive one. Then some improvements on tools were made, because the vulcanization of tools is quite important. Next one was geometries. As you all know, there are now several different rubbers regarding different geometries in the market, which is quite interesting for different styles of playing too. Then stickiness. Some of the manufacturers were in the past already very good in stickiness. Others came with new products. I think at the moment we are receiving some products over the last year. Yeah, and of course the process engineering over the complete process was developed in I think it's a different planet now if you compare the modern table tennis rubber manufacturers compared to 20 or 30 years before. It's really a difference. The consequences, innovation costs money. If you invest all the time in all your process steps and try to have a research department with, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 people full employed only for research, then of course this costs a lot of money. The technology level from my point of view is really high end now. There are really different rubbers for each player style in the market since a longer time. And this was when I was young, not like this. And the latest innovations are, I think, very, of course, costly. On the other side, they will go into each product on each level afterwards. So it's, I think it's a very positive thing. A technology leap that leads into much more diversity. Consequences from players and coaches from my point of view. I am absolutely sure that the right equipment will make your game much better. For me personally, it's a lot more fun if you have the right racket in your hand, regarding feeling, regarding your confidence is better, and of course your playing style and will be improved. My interpretation of right is that the right or the perfect racket, which I would like to say, is the rubber or the racket which supports your style. It's not what the top athletes are using, because I think each player in table tennis is unique and individual, which is fantastic. It's a fantastic part of our sport, I think. And for example, if I would play a product from top athletes, it's much too thick, and I would not have a good feeling for the ball. And yeah, my recommendation would always be learn about the effect of different rubber characteristics, and perhaps HPD, my colleagues from the high performance department and the equipment department can offer here something in the future. We started to talk about this. Yeah, I think it's a pleasure really to be able to test a bit on different rubber characteristics and find the right racket for each person. I think the table tennis shops have a good knowledge, and they will help each player if they offer some testing material. And yeah, if you invest a bit time, I think it's valuable. Yeah, let's talk a bit about the influence of color. Sometimes in the internet there are some statements that color is influencing the properties of table tennis rubbers heavily. From my experience, this is how color in the industry looks like. It's extremely intensive, very expensive. It looks like these kind of powders on the left, the red one and the green one. But for rubber production, because you are using an open mixing mill, you will use some other kind of color finally. Not here. I took out from the internet some photos how a recipe can look like. On the left, there's natural rubber, a block of natural rubber. Below, it's synthetic rubber, which is not in every rubber, but in some of them. And the right photo shows, it's an example, and I don't know what the black parts are in the back, but I think it's different rubber and some chemicals, and I think I cannot use my mouse. In front, you can see a red and black. This will be the color options. Of course, this is not showing a rubber recipe, but I wanted to show how it can look like in principle. So several parts are included, and the color part, because the color is so intensive, is really a very small amount. So if you see this portion of red color here, I would estimate that you can produce with this, I don't know, between 500 and 1,000 rubbers, because it's very intensive and it will, it's easy to mix it into the recipe. Yeah, the influence from my experience in the past, if you feel a difference between rubbers of the same make, the reason behind is much more often the variation within the production tolerances and not the color. This is, I think, all manufacturers will think like this. And top athletes, of course, I read in the internet, it's very clear that black rubbers have more spin, because this is the reason why the top players are using black on forehand quite often at the moment. But to answer to this point, I would not read too much into it, because over decades, all players used red rubbers on the forehand, not the black ones. So I think it's just a feeling point. If a player is practicing and he has a good feeling with a black rubber, and then he decides to play on forehand. But from my point of view, it's more feeling and not really reasons behind that the playing properties are different because of the color. From my experience, the tolerances inside a production regarding thickness, regarding hardness, regarding chemicals, vulcanization, you always have a certain swaying, and this is more the reason if there is a difference. But I am very convinced that the modern manufacturers, they have a fantastic quality control over each process step. So if you buy modern rubbers, the stability between different rubbers from the same character or same product, properties are really, really close to each other. So this is very positive for the player. Yeah, some statements for the new 4 colors. We checked a bit what's in the web, and we can start with the video. So hand over to Dominic, please. Colors are really cool and a modern presentation of table tennis. My name is Claudia Herwig, and I'm head of equipment inside the ITTF. The idea behind is to offer more options for players to choose, and of course to present our sport in the best way we can. The AGM decided with more than 75% of the delegates for new colors in table tennis rubbers. So it's a clear statement for a change here. The first step was to receive a huge sample set of different colors and saturations, and to take out all samples which were too close to the ball colors and also to the black rubber on the racket. This was the first major step to reduce the options, let's say. In the second step, we created a video test session in Cologne with 2 players. And we tested these critical areas which we had after the first decision, and the players could respond and explain to us which were too close to the black color and the ball colors, and give us their comments.
At first I can say no problems with all of them. This is the darkest one. It was for me very close to the normal red one, so no difference to see.
With the lighter one, I prefer this one because you can recognize faster, easier, with both sides from the table with service, so I prefer the lighter one.
After this test, we took out additional samples because they were too close to the black rubber and to the white and orange ball. And the fourth step was to go to T2 tournament in Singapore to show the final samples to the top player level.
currently we are playing mostly with the white ball, so I believe the rubbers has to fit with the white ball color. Maybe yellow is maybe too similar with the white ball. I don't know, maybe it's too soon to say so, but yeah, I don't see a big problem with the match with the ball.
My first feeling is that it's good to get some more colors into the sport, yeah, and also maybe for the young generation you can have different kind of colors. It makes the sport maybe a little more colorful. So I think it's a good thing to start to get back the little more colors into our sport.
There were answers like that, for example, the very bright yellow sample was too aggressive, so it could irritate the opponent. This was interesting, and there were quite a lot of responses from players who mentioned no problem at all. So I can differentiate between the black rubber and the new color. The overall outcome from my point of view was very positive, because I think players prefer to individualize their equipment, and this is one more option to be a bit more personal in equipment. Yeah, thank you very much, Dominic, for sharing. Go on to presentation again. I hope the video explained a bit about some open questions. We checked now the YouTube channel where the video was shown, and also the other publications. And we checked where are critical comments and also some questions, and these ones we would like to try to answer. Yeah, implementation date, one player wrote, any manufacturers making these rubbers yet? I hope so, because they are allowed to sell them and to announce to us from 1st of April. And if the products will be approved, then they will be on our list from 1st of October 2021. So the shops and retailers in the market are allowed to sell them from beginning of October this year. Yeah, 1st of October. Why change? Quite some persons commented that what is the point? What is the aim? The aim is, of course, not to change something on the playing properties. It's a design change. It's option to choose, and I think the equipment committee proposed this change here, and also the Hong Kong Federation. I was not inside the ITTF at this stage, or just 1 or 2 months, and I think it was a very, very positive proposal, and why not, you can answer. And after more than 75% of the delegates reacted positive, I think it's a good reason to do so. One column statement was colorblind players. I think we have no risk here. Of course, we thought about this because one side of the racket will stay black, so dark, and the other one will be bright. So from our point of view, no problem for colorblind players. Table tennis shop storage cost is a point. Of course, this is a point. I will not refuse this, but if you see that at the moment we have around 1,650 different authorized products, both of them in red and black, so 3,300 different versions. And normally each product is offered in the market, let's say at the end, in 3 different sponge thicknesses or rubber thicknesses. So you have 9,900. And then some products are offered in different versions, from rubber sheet to sponge. So it's clearly already now more than 10,000 different products. So compared to the past, when we had 300 authorized products, the time that a table tennis shop can store and all the different products is far behind us, really far behind us. And now, whether some products will now be offered in different colors, I think this will not make a huge difference regarding the storage costs. For me, table tennis shops, this is my personal opinion, the job of the table tennis shop changed a bit, that they are the consultant for the player, which kind of rubbers will fit to the player's needs. And I think the table tennis shop needs to decide or make testings and definitions of their own store, what they will offer to the player. And if something is missing, they need to order. But I think this is the role of the table tennis shops worldwide changed quite a lot over the last decades. The price, yes, honestly speaking, this is not ITTF topic, because our job is to define the regulations inside our technical leaflets, and it depends finally on the decision of the brands whether the prices for new colors will be higher. I would not expect a real big change here, because to change the color inside a recipe and inside the production is not so demanding compared to technical changes. Color top sheet and sponge. Of course, the sponge color can influence the rubber sheet color if the rubber sheet is not opaque, if it's translucent, then the sponge color will influence. But in our testings, we test each sponge and rubber sheet combination. We always test on the surface of the rubber sheet with the different sponge combinations and measure whether the final color is inside our range, allowed ranges, yes or no. So at the end, no problem. It's a job for the manufacturers and brands to define this carefully. But finally, it will be checked in the lab, and everything should be okay in the market. Players' wish, yes, there were some quite critical comments, but we can handle this. It's okay. I think regarding the camera angle, our colleagues from World Table Tennis are working very intensively on this topic. And also some critical comics, whether we work on new rubber colors and not on, from their point of view, more important topics. I think we work on both topics. And there were a lot of very positive comments too. So players wish, there are some negative comments, but there are a lot of players which really likes this change. So if you see, we have on the video around 28,000 hits and 499 likes and 109 dislikes. And on a survey in German table tennis website, from 150 players, I think 65 would stay on the red rubber, and all others, so 44%, would decide for a new color. So I think players which there are both groups, and ITTF is responsible for all of you. So it's both are included. Manufacturer production, there were comments that the retooling of machinery, everything will be complicated. In my experience, to change the color, the manufacturers are used to it because they have to do it between red and black. And now they have to do it from red to blue, but I think for a producer, this is of course some investments, because each color needs to be checked before the final recipe will be accepted in the production. But it's not a major problem from my experience. Orange and table color, orange balls with orange rubber is not approved at the moment because it's too close to each other. We will check this, whether we can do this, yes or no, in the future, but at the moment not. And also, we had a question that green table would be in conflict with the green rubber, but the table color is never in conflict with rubber color. One question was, will there be each rubber in each color? It was quite negative that too much options, but of course I can promise, even this is the decision of the brands and the manufacturers, not the ITTF decision. But I am absolutely sure that the brands will consider very carefully which products they will offer in a new color and which products not. If you see, our job was to define in C-Lab, it's a color set up to define the lightness, hue, and saturation. And we defined the range, which is possible for the brands and manufacturers to define new products. So here you can see one picture of this work where there's a dark blue here and middle blue and light blue. And finally, there's a range in between where the brands and manufacturers can develop new products. But we will not have each rubber in 4 new colors. This is for sure. Classic, a lot of comments that red and black is classic and the best combination. No problem at all. If you would like to stay on this classic combination, just do it. Not a problem. But in the future, you have an opponent which perhaps will use a pink rubber or blue one or green one. The color range inside the ITTF, the transparent rubber or other colors could be implemented in the future, but we wanted to start the equipment committee and department at the same opinion that we would like to start with a reduced range, and we can open this afterward if the first experiences are positive. Irritation, this was one German comment that red and black was fantastic and it could irritate the new colors. I think that when I was young, I played with the blue rubbers and green and transparent. This is not a new innovation. This is something from the past, which I think Jürgen Persson got European champion in 1986 with a green rubber. So it's nothing new. So we don't expect any irritations here because the experiences from the past were very positive. Research sources, the final point. Yeah, some negative comments on that we should work on the plastic ball fiasco and on different ball characteristics. Just for your information, if in our webinar presented, I think some months ago, of course, we work on the projects which influences the playing properties and the game. Of course, this is always our priority, of course, because we understand very well that the development in the plastic ball was needed, and we invested 2019. It was #1 priority in 2019 to work with the manufacturers from plastic, because celluloid is also plastic, from celluloid plastic to nowadays ABS. We also are currently working very intensive on ball bounce on tables to reduce the characteristics of the different bounces of balls on different table surfaces. So we understand this very well, and we totally agree with these negative comments, but you can be sure that we spend most of our time on these topics. Also on the boosting topic, and our colleagues from World Table Tennis on the match camera for sure. Important, yes, it's a design project, and not a playing property project, but we could do this together with a more important project. It was not a problem regarding our resources. The ITTF invested now in the equipment part inside the ITTF. We are working with 3 full-time persons now in the office in Cologne. And so it was not a problem regarding resources. Yeah, thank you. This was my presentation. So back to Dominic.
Yeah, actually, I would like to take initiative on this because very, very interesting facts and a lot of information, a lot of good new things coming up in future. And well, from our side, we have prepared already some questions, but I would remind our attendees to drop their questions which actually Claudia already answered so to many questions in the presentations. So you spoiled our ideas. But anyway, Claudia, great congratulations! Thank you very much for the nice presentation. Dominic, I would start with one question. So we know that the feedback from champions super important, but also the feedback regarding new product, new rubbers or whatever, also coming from the base, from the regular players. So how the companies assess this kind of feedback? I mean, of course the champions are definitely relevant for them, but also how did they take the mass, let's say, feedback regarding a product?
Yeah, thank you, Massimo. It's a very interesting question. I think for the top athletes, there is a close cooperation between the brands, so the who are the sponsor of the player, and in a very close contact normally to the top players, and together with the manufacturer. So they meet the top player, they test some new products or ideas from the manufacturers or brands, and of course they listen very carefully to the players' demands, because these of course sometimes changes because of other equipment changes like the balls or things like this. And of course also table tennis, you know this better than me because you are the coach. Table tennis change regarding banana, regarding how to open the game in services and in backhand properties, forehand properties. So if you see this, then the manufacturer has to listen to the top player very carefully, which kind of demands they have. Sometimes players are really good in this, in explaining technical things. Some of them it's not so easy, but it's a close cooperation on this level between the brand, the player, and the manufacturer. On the top players don't like to test too much, so you need to listen very carefully, and because they need to focus on training, of course, as you know. And so the brand and manufacturer needs to prepare very carefully the next step. And normally in the big manufacturers, they have their own department here. So I think my former company has, I don't know at the moment, but I would expect 2, 3, 4 fully employed table tennis players who check the rubbers before they will go to the top athlete, not to disturb the athlete too much, and to do the job as best as you can inside the company. So the rubber industry, I think, offers some hundreds of positions to spend your working life inside your passion. So this is fantastic. From the market side, it's a bit different. I think the shops respond a lot to the brands, also the retailers. And then the cooperation from the brand between the brand and the manufacturer is very intensive. So they respond a lot that the market, for example, has problems here regarding durability, because it's not only properties, it's also durability, it's stability in the product, lasting, and such kind of topics also are very, very important. And here the cooperation between brand and manufacturer is very important because the manufacturer is not close enough to the market. Therefore, you need the brand and the shops to listen to the players in the market from the lowest level up to the highest level. It's very important to get a good response.
Great. Yeah, so close cooperation between the actors involved in that. I like the idea of the recipe because, so we have the taste. The recipe is one, but then each player has their own taste, and Absolutely. Then we can like something or can like something else. So it's very, very nice. Very nice statement of the recipe. I like it. So I would pass to Dominic. You also have a question for Claudia. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Massimo. But before asking Claudia the question, I would like to kindly remember our attendees to feel free to use this unique chance to ask Claudia any questions regarding our topic of today. And I totally agree with Max and want to thank you, Claudia, very much for your comprehensive and great presentation, especially when knowing how difficult and which huge work it is to pack so much information in such a short lesson, I mean, sorry, not language. And Claudia, now to the question. You were talking about the right racket and emphasized that right means not what the top players are playing, but what suits to the athlete's style. But there are more than 10,000 products on the market. Regarding the ratio between the sponge and the rubber, are there any rules when setting up a racket for a specific playing style? So regarding the thickness and the geometry of the rubber?
Yes, of course there are rules in the technical leaflet T4. It's defined the aspect ratio of pimples, for example. Also the maximum thicknesses of rubber sheet and complete rubber with 4.0 are fixed, but there also at the same time there's some free area for the manufacturers to develop something new. And for player style, if I try to explain, if you have the different recipes and modern producer now in a pimple in rubbers, you have, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 different recipes. And then you can imagine that the matrix, because you have the different sponge hardnesses, you have the different geometries, which has nothing to do with the recipe, because this is something else. And then you can have these combinations. So finally, you have a huge matrix. But of course, not all of the 10,000 rubbers are different. Some of them are, of course, very close, or in some parts also the same. But there are, compared to the past, really a huge range of differences. And if I would test with a new player, of course, I would look, is he playing very close to the table or half distance? Is he an offensive player? And then it's a more detailed work, whether, for example, which geometry supports the playing style. The hardness, if the sponge hardness is very soft, it's not the right rubber for players on half distance, because you need some power, and the power is coming out of the sponge. And here a certain hardness is quite important. So yeah, it's work. So it's a lot of, in a rubber company, testing on the table and in the lab. It's a lot of effort is going into these parts.
Thank you very much, Claudia. And yeah, we totally agree with you and think that there are so many thousands hours, I would say, needed to choose the right racket, to produce the right rubber for the player. And yeah, so huge work. And I would like to pass over to you, Max, for the next question.
Yeah, well, talking about the various different rubbers from the manufacturers. Regarding the quality of the rubber, I mean the pimples in or pimples out, or long pimples, short. Are the procedures in making those rubbers the same, or they have a different procedures? Maybe they have different machines. I don't know. Most likely. So, can you tell us a little bit more on this?
Yeah, hopefully we can visit a rubber manufacturer together, Massimo. Would be nice, so that you can see this with your own eyes. But from the procedure steps, it's very comparable. So pimple out rubbers, whether it's short pimple or long pimple, raw material is comparable. Mixing process is the same. The difference is mainly in the tool technology in the rubber vulcanization. The tool technology, because in pimple out rubbers you have the engraving on the whole plate, and for pimple in rubbers you have the engraving on the mold. For pimple in rubbers you can exchange the whole plate below. For pimple out rubbers not. So there's the difference. The tool technology is completely different. Also, the gluing is sometimes tricky with long pimples, which have a very thin base, and it's not so easy. But in general, the processes are comparable or the same. Yes.
Okay, almost the same. Good. It's your turn, Dominique. Back to you.
Thank you very much. And you were now talking about the procedures and so on, Claudia. But how long does it take the company to produce one rubber, meaning from the recipe till the final assembling?
It's a long time ago that I calculated this. From getting the raw material you need to create the final recipe, you need 15 minutes. Then on the mixing machine and shaping the material, from my experience, 1.5 hours. But of course, you're not producing one rubber. You're producing the mixing process, of course, some hundreds of rubber, one lot number, which is depending on the manufacturer, different quantity in one lot, I think. But mixing process around 1.5 hours. Then the vulcanization is for one rubber is something around 10 minutes, but not so long. But afterward, the rubber sheet needs to stay in storage for a certain time. In sponge, also mixing 1.5 hours, and vulcanization takes a little bit longer. Then also the block needs to stay in the storage, because there are some processes still working inside the material, and before you slice this needs to be reduced. Slicing is also for one block around 5 minutes, 10 minutes. The problematic part is not the time regarding costs. It's a lot of handwork, and it's a lot of different process steps. So the final time will not be so long because the single steps are done in some moments. But a lot of handwork, a lot of quality control. So each person, I think I have shown the production in my past, some hundreds, no, not hundreds, but let's say 100 persons. And nobody did not answer after the showing the production, wow, I never expected so much handwork. I never expected so much procedural steps. So I think most of the people think that you put rubber inside the machine on the left side, and on the right side there will be a rubber coming out, but this is not reality.
Thank you. And this would be also interesting. How high is the heat when doing the vulcanization, Claudia?
Yeah, this is depending on the recipe. The chemist will define the recipe, what kind of vulcanization and what is inside the recipe. And then it's depending on this. And some parts I would not like to tell, because I, of course, have some secrecy agreements from my past. But it's some let's say, quite a high temperature and high pressure. And as a temperature, pressure, and time is the important parts on vulcanization. And for each recipe, this is different.
Okay, Claudia, thank you very much.
This is what I can say.
Thank you. Pass over to you, Max.
Yeah, I have one more question. Well, actually, no, maybe I have two questions. Yeah, well, okay. Regarding testing the rubbers, how this will works in terms of testing with the same let's say equipment, like tables and the racket, because we know that racket are different, right? So and also tables, the bounce, the friction. Maybe you produce a spin on the rubbers, and then the outcome on the table can be different. So when testing, the test is only on the same surface and the racket, or it will be carried out with many different to vary and check more stability and quality.
Yeah, this is one question, but it's a very important one. And I think each manufacturer works since decades on this part. So in a rubber production, you have some testings in the chemical part. Then you have at the end, normally each modern manufacturer has a huge lab with some devices from the rubber industry and some individual devices which you developed over the years to be able to measure playing properties inside the production for the production control, but also, of course, for research and development all the time. Because the third step is that the full employed players or external players will check and respond you. So this is normally the process that you have the chemist or the testings on the chemist part, then you have testings on the mechanical part in the lab, and from the players' comments. In a rubber production, I am used that each rubber you test have no mold. So with your finger, if you test the rubber with a racket, then you cannot feel the mold design, and you should not see any sponge or something. So the test person cannot see what kind of rubber is on forehand or backhand. It's always the same color. And the rubbers, of course, as you said, must be as, or the rest of the racket on the playing equipment must be as close as possible to each other. So, for example, you are using special blades, which are very strongly controlled, that the differences are not too much. That if you feel differences, you should feel the differences in the rubber, not in the blade. And of course, you are playing with the best ball quality you can get. You need to test in big halls. If you test in a venue which is too small, then your response, you know this, I think, well, as a player, is different from a big hall. So a lot of efforts are made. This is not comparable to the testing of normal players in the market, to be able to really feel what is the difference in the rubber and not in other equipment parts. And perhaps we can, in the future, invite one or two persons who explain a bit more how to test in a proper way. Why not?
I see.
If there is interest.
Okay. I have a quick question. Watching the video, I was thinking about the new colors of the rubbers and the lights of the venues. You know, sometimes you have strong lights with angle, or white light is a super power light. Can the light, the condition of the venue affect some understanding when a player hit the ball with the pink color or with the green and so on? Can this affect? Have you had any test on this?
Yeah, we tested in the video. You can see we invested a bit money and time into one testing in a professional surrounding with very much light from above, so professional venue. And the second testing was in a hall with glass windows with a lot of daylight, very, very critical conditions. And therefore not to get any problems. The definition of the range was very close. So no dark rubbers are allowed and no really bright colors are allowed. Perhaps we can do something more in the future, but in the first round, we decided to be very conservative here. So I would not expect any problems. And if, for example, players are playing both sides pimple in rubbers, then it's not very interesting for me whether he hits the ball with a blue side or with a black side, because it's interesting if you have a long, for example, a defender or something, and he's playing with a long pimple and a pimple in rubber on the other side. Then it's very important to distinguish the two sides. But if I would play against you, I think you're an offensive player. Then it's not so interesting whether it's pink or blue or red, I think.
Okay, great interaction with Claudia around the world of rubbers. So back to you, Dominic. We have something else, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Massimo. Yeah, and now it's time to skip and go over to the question and answer part of the webinar. And Claudia, we would like to start with our prior webinar questions, and your fellow countryman, Gerd Selig, also a warm welcome from my side, Gerd, who is an international racket tester and blue badge umpire, would like to know the following thing. When will there be a test device that determines the grip of the coverings?
Did I understand you right? When there will be a device which is able to test different properties of racket coverings or rubbers?
The grip of the coverings, yeah.
Yeah, grip. I think what most of the people does not know that, of course, there are already devices which can measure playing properties, also grip, and also durability from rubbers inside the manufacturers. But of course, they will not share this because this is they need to hide this because they have competitors, of course. But I think each of the big producers, they have really good special devices to measure table tennis properties on racket coverings, because they have to do this every day in research and development. For normal consumers, for players in the market, I think we are speaking at the moment about the project to be able to measure a bit more for properties. But yeah, this is, I think, perhaps part of the future. So please, Gerd, be a bit patient until we can offer a bit more, perhaps, digitalization here. At the moment, I think only the manufacturers can do so, not somebody inside the market. Only normal testing, of course, if you play, you can test it. But of course, there are devices, but not in the market.
Thank you, Claudia. And pass over to you, Max.
Yeah, I have one question from Colombia, Manuela Forero. The question is, how do you calculate the coefficient of friction and the coefficient of restitution, static and dynamics? Very, very specific.
Yeah, but very specific, but very, very good question, of course. I cannot answer in detail because I'm not a physicist. We have a device at the moment which is called inside the equipment department. It's called BBOT, and there for this device we had a tender outside, and a consultant company offered a device which measures the bounce of the ball on a table surface, and in this it measures the coefficient of restitution and friction. And I think very important is, as Manuela perfectly understood, that playing properties in table tennis has to do with two moving parts. The ball is moving and the racket is moving. So you cannot do and measure something with, for example, to take the ball and just let it fall on the table surface, and then you measure the restitution. But this will not say something or so much about table tennis. So in the rubber industry, there are physicists externally, internally, depends on the company who develops models, physical models. And of course, in each company unique, there will be some special devices to be able to measure this. Inside our department at the moment, we have no chance to measure On ball bounce on table, yes, but on racket coverings, not. And there's no need for the moment, but we are working on this because I think the ITTF needs to be able to measure playing properties much better than we did this in the past. I hope this will answer a bit Manuela's question.
Yeah, maybe Manuela can tell us, but anyway, I hope your answer was extremely good. And for the prior webinar, actually we have done so. Dominic, we can start with some questions came from the attendees. So back to you.
Thanks, Max. You are right. And now the question of all questions for you, Claudia. Ahmed Kosfe would like to know if the rubber used by the top players, for example, like the Chinese top player, or we can even take, I don't know, Timo Boll or somebody else, if this is the same rubber as on the market.
Yeah, this question is, of course, a bit sensitive because we are working on this topic with different manufacturers because I think it's very important to be the same or very close here. And I can be honest, this is not perfectly the case in all examples. But we are working on this. But on the other hand, it's not so important because please imagine that each manufacturer has to, and also the brands, has to test innovations so that the highest level of innovation is always tested on the top level sometimes for a certain period is normal. I think it's in the Formula One, it's like this, and each equipment sport in skiing and biking and in a lot of sports it's quite usual. But this should only be allowed for a certain time for testing and for checking whether this is interesting or not. And afterward, this kind of innovations should go into the normal rubbers which are available in the market. Yeah, so we agree to this. But as I said before, I think the innovation level in the market on racket coverings is really extraordinary. And each player can find unbelievable good rubber, which is very, very close or very, to find the right racket for your own style of playing. I think it's very important too. But we are working on this topic to get this on a perfect level. It's good, but it's not perfect from my point of view.
Thank you very much, Claudia. And pass over to you, Max, for the next question.
Yeah, the time, wow, really flew, and we have a couple of more from our attendees. Claudia, a question from Ian Rind, I don't know exactly. Can you confirm that when the new colors come in, will one side still have to be black?
Yes, I can confirm to Ian. One side will be black. And the other side will be red, pink, purple, blue, or green. So, yeah.
So, Ian, confirmed, one side black. So don't put one green, one pink, otherwise you get disqualified and then the game is over. So remember.
You can do this in practice, but not in competition.
Yeah, the black one should be there. Okay, back to you, Dominic, and then we can conclude.
Thank you very much, Massimo. And yeah, Claudia, it was a great pleasure for us to talk with you. And we would like to, continue talking, but the time flies. And yeah, it's now time for the last question. And it's from Ludovic Chaumont. And he would like to know why the new colors can substitute the red side and not the black side. So why do they save the black side, he asked.
We save the black side to be distinguished from each other. So if you have a dark side on the one side, which is the black side, then it's easier to distinguish to another color regarding brightness. So if we would open to to each color for both sides, then the definition of the colors would be more difficult, and for players also, so colorblind players will have difficulties if the brightness of rubbers, for example, if you are using pink and purple, for colorblind persons, very difficult to distinguish. Possible if you separate or define the ranges very regulated, but if you have one black side, then it's much easier to handle these kind of problems. I hope, Ludovic, this answers to your question.
I do think so, Claudia. And yeah, dear Claudia, we, the entire ITTF HPD team, we want to thank you a lot for taking the time to be here today and sharing your vast knowledge and your expertise from the last decades regarding the topic, the world of the table tennis rubbers, Claudia. So thank you very much.
Always welcome. Really appreciate to work with you all. It's always a pleasure. And hopefully we could answer some questions and inform in a first part about some rubber manufacturing backgrounds. So I hope this was interesting. Yeah, thanks a lot to you, Dominic, Massimo, also to the colleagues in HPD.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for your kind words. And I would also like to thank all the attendees for attending today's webinar. And we hope our 39 ITTF HPD Table Tennis at Your Fingertips webinar was very interesting for you. And I'm looking forward to our next webinar, which will be in the near future. So stay tuned and check out our ITTFeducation.com page and our ITTF HPD Facebook page for further information. That's all from my side for today. Stay safe and healthy, and I kindly ask my dear colleague Massimo for his closing words.
Thank you, Dominic. Again and again, thank you very much, Claudia, for this presentation and opening actually the new parts of our webinars or our rendezvous with the knowledge, because equipment, it's a very vast and important topic that never ending to talk actually. So maybe we will have other opportunity in next future to meet again. Congratulations for your work. Thank you again. Thank you, Dominic. Thank you from the backhand, and see you next time. And ciao.
Ciao.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.